Hello everyone, good morning. Let's wait for 1 or 2 minutes, guys, for others to dial in. Let's get started. Yes, I'm sharing my screen. And we're going to look at the business cycles starting from today. We'll start off with Procure-to-Pay. And remember, we've discussed the required context for this one in the previous session, right? So we exactly know when these cycles come into picture in terms of the business flows. And we'll start off with Procure-to-Pay today. And in this one, first let me give you a high-level overview of what we're going to do in this one. So a procure-to-pay, meaning you buy something from a supplier and you carry out the entire cycle till you make the payment to the supplier. So that's what it stands for, procure-to-pay. And what are the steps involved here? So yes, we create a purchase requisition. So normally you can start off and that's where you start off with, or even before requisition, you could probably ask your suppliers to submit a quote. So you could say that I need these raw materials, or I need these items. Could you submit a quote? And based on the quotes that you receive, you could probably pick up a supplier that you might want to go with, and then you go ahead and create a requisition. So we're not starting off with a quote, but yeah, that could be a prerequisite step in some projects. Okay, so we'll create a requisition, assuming that the supplier is finalized, and we need we know what items we need. We create a purchase requisition, and then we progress it, and we go ahead and create a purchase order based on it. So purchase order, it's like a legal binding document, legal document between you and supplier, agreeing on the terms and conditions. You tell to supplier that yeah, these are the items that I need, and we agreed on this particular price, and you will deliver these goods by so and so date, and I will make the payment by so and so date. And then you go ahead and you will complete the purchase order. I mean, you would see the purchase order. There are a few options that you have to select when you create it. So you do that, and then you receive a purchase order. Okay, yeah, that's true. Thanks, Kumar. It's not AR invoice, it's AP invoice. Yes. And you would receive a purchase order. Of course, the supplier would ship the items, you would receive them, and after you receive them, you would create an AP invoice, match it with a purchase order, and then yeah, you would match it with an explicit line within a purchase order, and then you make a payment. And after you make a payment, the disbursement payment file format. If you have probably created a custom file format, that kicks in here, payment file gets generated, and this will be sent over to the bank, and the bank would make the payment. And how would they execute the payment? They would deduct the funds from your bank account, a company's bank account, and they would transfer it to a supplier bank account. And I've given screenshots for each and every step in this particular process. So there are around 37 slides. If you just follow these screenshots blindly, you would be able to do it. Okay. So all we do is just let me walk you through the slides first. We are going to log in as multiple users, I'm not going to get into the user creation part or the required access that you need in as part of these cycles, because that itself will take quite a bit of time. So what we do is we use a standard users that Oracle gives to carry out the process. So first up, we log in as Calvin Roth, who is a procurement manager. Because when you have to raise a purchase requisition, or when you have to create a purchase order or receive it, or receiving is a different story. When you have to create a PR or a PO, you need to have a required access. And what access you need? You need to be registered as a buyer. So there would be a user attached, right? So we are going to log in as Calvin Roth, and that Calvin Roth user needs to have an employee attached in the user profile. So remember, when you create a user, you can create a user standalone without a person, or you can create a user with an employee, right? So this procurement manager for Calvin Roth is a user who has an employee attached, and that employee is a registered buyer. So you have a setup task where called manage buyers. You go in there and you register him as a buyer. And only after you do that, a specific employee or a user would be able to get into the PO screens. So even as a technical consultant, if you are probably responsible for loading POs or purchase requisitions or anything related to PO, or maybe the suppliers, or especially the POs, after you do the data load, you might want to verify whether they are loaded successfully or not, right? So in which case, when they create a user for you, what they do, they create a dummy buyer and they attach it to your user, and they would give you access in production for maybe a couple of hours till the time you do the data load. After the data is loaded, they would revoke the access. They would end date the buyer that they have created. Okay, so we would log in as Calvin Roth, a procurement manager. We pick up the purchase requisitions under procurement. We go ahead and enter a requisition line. We pick up a specific item. Again, we're going to pick up a standard item. We'll pick up one of the established suppliers. We'll pick up Dell US. And then we pick up that specific item, add it to the cart, and we create a requisition. You get a confirmation. And then if in some cases, what would happen is after you create a requisition, you would notice that they keep getting rejected. If that happens in the instance that you're trying, if this happens, what you could do is you could go into this manage requisitions approval task. So there is a task called manage requisition approvals. You go into that particular task, and then you have to get into this particular stage called header stage, and you need to write in a rule there. And what do you say? What do you write in that rule? In that rule, you set it up in such a way that you assign highest priority to that rule. And then you say, if the requisitioning BU is US1 business unit, meaning if the requisition is created with US1 BU, you add an action which says auto approved. Okay, remember, this is slightly different from the transaction console that we have seen when we did the workflow approvals. Yes, that is applicable for most of the scenarios, but for some of the use cases like requisition or a PO approvals, you have different tasks like this. Okay, so you have to go into manage requisition approval task and you have to write your own rule in there. But the way you plug in the rules, or the rules or the actions, it's almost the same way, or works the same way as you have seen in the approval session. Okay, so you need not worry about this. If the requisition gets approved, you need not worry about these two bits. But if the requisition ends in error, this is what you have to do. You have to go into this particular task, create a rule, and set up a rule in such a way that if the requisition is created in US1 BU, auto approve the requisition. And then what do? You go ahead and go to the purchase order screen and you would process the requisition, meaning you auto create the purchase order from the requisition that is created. Okay, and how do you do it? All you have to do is you can search with the requisition number here if you want, or when you go in there, by default, it will show the recent requisitions that you have created. And you pick up a requisition and then you go ahead and click OK, add it in. And what you could do, you could add in the requisition, and you would be able to see. You pick it up and you click on add to document builder and you create it, and a PO gets created. After the PO is created, yes, it gets submitted for approval. Again, the same story repeats. If it gets rejected for whatever reason, in case it happens, then you go into that particular approval task and you see you set up a rule if required, or change the way it behaves. And then what you have to do after you create a PO, you have to receive the goods, right? And that's when you have to log in as a SCM IMPL user, because you need a different responsibility, right? Because you need to have access to inventory to be able to receive the goods into it. So you would log in as SCM IMPL user. IMPL stands for implementation users. You have HCM underscore IMPL, fin underscore IMPL, SCM underscore IMPL. For each module, you have IMPL users. And for some IMPLs, you have multiple users. Like if you take HCM underscore IMPL, you have users from 1 to 10. So we'll log in as SCM IMPL. We go into supply chain execution, inventory management, and we try to receive expected shipments. So we know that yes, there is one PO that is expected to be that needs to be received. So you go in there and you pick up that service, search for that purchase order, and you receive the goods. Okay, so you receive the goods. You have to pick up as whom you are receiving it. You could probably pick up any specific name in that list, and then you can click on create receipt. So this is like creating a PO receipt. Okay, so you're basically saying that yes, this is like you receiving the goods into your inventory that the supplier has shipped you. Okay, and then the receipt is created. After that, what you have to do, so you've asked supplier to provide some goods to you. He has shipped it, you have received them, and then it's time for you to make the payment. Then what you would do, you would log in as fin underscore IMPL into the same instance. You go into payables, create an AP invoice. And what do? You create an invoice. And when you create an invoice, you don't create it as a manual invoice. Instead, there is an identifying PO option available in there. So if the PO is in closed state, or if the PO is successfully received, you would be able to query that PO here. And from the PO, all other details will be defaulted, like the business unit, supplier, other details would be defaulted. You can give it a number, AP invoice, you can give a number to it, and you can select, you can mention how much amount you want to pay to that particular or against that particular invoice. And here you have an option to match the invoice lines with the PO lines. So if there's one PO line, you can match it, and you can say, yes, against this PO line, I want to pay supplier this much amount. So you click on this, and when you click on it, it shows you the PO lines. There's only one line. If there's only one line that shows up here, okay, you pick it up, and then you go back, and after you add, match the invoice lines, a line gets added to the invoice, and then you can go ahead and validate it. And after you validate the invoice, what will happen is when you validate the invoice, the tax configuration kicks in. And if any tax needs to be applied on the amount that you're paying to the supplier, that gets calculated, and the total would get recalculated. So even though the amount that I need to pay is 990, there's a tax of 94.0405 applied on top of it. So the total is this. And when you normally validate the invoice for the first time, you might have probably created an invoice with an amount which is equal to PO amount. But when you validate it, a tax gets calculated, total gets readjusted, but your amount will be still 990. So when there is a mismatch between the total invoice total and the total that you entered there, the invoice goes into needs revalidation state. What you could do in such case, you could copy the total from here, paste it in there, and then you could hit the validate button again, validate again. Usually it goes into needs revalidation state, update the amount from whatever you see in the total, update it here and revalidate it. After you revalidate it, invoice gets validated, and then you can directly make the payment of the invoice. You can say pay in full. You can directly pay the invoice from this particular screen, or you can create a payment separately as well if you want. So you can pay in full, and when you say pay in full, it'll ask you from which bank account you want to make the payment and what is the payment process profile. And remember, this is where if you still remember what we discussed in the disbursement payment file format session, we created a payment process profile in that session, right? We created a custom BA template, custom e-text template, and we have done all the required configurations there. So you select appropriate payment process profile where you had your custom e-text template, and then you go ahead and submit it. After that, what will happen? The payment will be done, payment will be created. And if you go back into monitor process, you would notice that a format payment files job would have been run, and you would be able to see a payment file that has been generated. And if you open up the payment file, it will be in an appropriate format that the bank expects it to be in. And if that payment process profile that you select here, if that has a transmission configuration attached, the payment file would also be, the payment file that is generated here would also be transmitted to a UCM or an SFTP, so that bank can pick up this file from those destinations and they can execute the payment. And after the payment is done, for whatever transactions you do in the subledgers, you have to post them to GL. How do you do it? You just have to click on actions and then post it to GL. So you don't just post a payment to GL, you also post the invoice to GL. You also post the PO to GL as well. So all the subledgers, AP, AR, GL, PO, everything, it comes under a or called as subledgers. And whatever transactions you do, accounting transactions, you have to post them to ledger, and they get reconciled there, or they get reported from there rather. Okay, so this is what we're going to execute. Let's go back and let's start off with the cycle. Let's log in as Calvin Roth first. I'm using dev12 instance for this one. So you guys can probably try to use the same instance to avoid any instance related issues. You can use a dev12 ESCC dev12 instance. It's available in Fusion Cloud instance links. Or let me ping those credentials here in the chat. Okay, so I've logged in as Calvin Roth first, and I go into procurement. I can create a purchase requisition. And you can create. So what you could probably do is, instead of creating a purchase requisition for a specific item, you could also probably raise a requisition for a specific service as well. So it's not that you always buy items from suppliers. You might also take some service from the suppliers, for which also you might have to pay them. So when you create a requisition, you could create it as a service requisition or as an item requisition. So if you take the item, there are a lot of things that come into picture, like you would probably have to see if the item is if all the item configurations are set up correctly, whether we can receive it into a specific BU or not, and all those steps. So just to avoid those complications, what we do is we create it as a service PR, much like what I've done here. So what you could do to create a requisition line, you click on this, enter requisition line, and you give it a number. I think the number gets automatically generated. You can, if you want to pick up an item, you can pick up an item, or it's not mandatory. If it's a service-based requisition, you could create it. You could enter just a description. If you say, you could say it's a service-based purchase requisition. You're buying some services from a supplier, and you could pick up a category. Pick up any services. Let me see what is it that I've used in the previous one. You could pick up any. But I don't see the one that I've picked up. It's okay. Create a purchase requisition. Can enter a category. You pick up an appropriate service type. So maybe you got some legal consulting services or some professional services, you picked up. And yes, you can say quantity 1. You can say each. and you can enter the price in there. Say for example, if you have to pay say $990 for the services that you receive, you enter the amount there, and you can select the supplier from whom you are receiving the services. Ideally, when you select a supplier like Dell, you might probably be buying a laptop, not receiving a consulting services. But yeah, I'm just picking up an odd combination here. Excuse for that. So yes, you would pick up the item that you're trying to buy or a service that you're trying to buy. Pick up a category which is relevant to it. Pick up a supplier from whom you intend to receive the service, and then scroll down, see if the details are populated, especially the charge account. And then you scroll up, you go ahead and add it to the cart. It's added to the cart there. You click on it, you would be able to see your item that you have added to the cart. You could add multiple items if you want. Okay, this is like you doing the shopping on Amazon. Okay, so you pick up whatever you want, add it to the cart, and then you proceed with it, right? So you go ahead and submit it. You could review it if you want. Could see requisition created, pick it up. You could view the PDF if you want. And this is where the reports that you build comes into picture. Could see a PDF created, open it up. You would be able to see the purchase requisition getting printed. So this can be printed out and it can be sent across to the supplier. Yes, this is what we intend to buy from you, and these are the details. And it's pending approval at the moment, the status. You can wait for the status to change. You copy the purchase order, copy the requisition number, and you can wait for it to get changed to approved. Yeah, that's okay. I want to proceed with a refresh. You could see that it has been rejected. Okay, so we can go back and see. So what is it that you need to do when if it is rejected? So we have to go into this particular option, the manage requisition approval task, and we need to see if the rules are in place or not. You could see why it has been rejected as well. If you click on it, it shows you a life cycle. You have an option to see the details of it. And what do you see? It's been submitted, and and approval encountered an error. So this would be the scenario if you if the approval tasks are not set up correctly. So what do you need to do to fix this? So what you could do is you could copy this, log into the instance from a different browser here. Yeah, you don't have setup and maintenance for this user, Calvin Roth. So approvals is typically set up by implementation users and sysadmin has an option to edit that. So you can log in as Casey Brown, who is a system administrator, to set up the approvals, right? The passcode will remain same. Any user any user you use to log in, you can use the same password. So I'm trying to log in as Casey Brown, a system administrator, so that I can see what are the approval rules that exist, and I can change it if required. So you scroll down, go to setup and maintenance. You can go into global search, and you can search for manage requisition. Then search for manage requisition approvals. And you could see that this is a particular stage that you have to get into. Others are fine. You could have approvals. You could have a pre-approval stage, actual approval, and a post-approval stage as well if you want. But yeah, we are mainly concerned about the main approval, not the pre or post-approval. You get into it. You can edit the rules, and you can see the rules that exist in the application. So here, if you notice, so if you notice the rules here, someone has deleted the rule that I've created earlier. I've done it in the same instance. I created a rule. So let's go ahead and create a rule. Probably it benefits everyone here. So what you have to do, you probably have to create a rule which says UG auto approve requisitions. Let's assign highest priority to it so that this rule gets executed first. And I can add a condition, and I can say yes, any purchase requisition created in US1 BU. So I can search for the attribute, requisition attributes, and I can base my approval rule on any of these attributes. So I want to say a requisitioning BU, pick it up. If the requisitioning BU is equal to US1 BU, and you could add another, and you could say if the amount exceeds 1,000, auto approve it, or less than 1,000, auto approve it. You could add as many rules as you want. Remember, this is like you writing the rules in transaction console that you have seen earlier, right? So add it in, and then you can add an action. What you could say in the add action, you could say yes, automatic approval. Otherwise, what you could do, what else you could have done? You could have set up a detailed approval rules. You could have gone through that process of approvals as well. But we've already dealt it in a separate session, right? So I'm just automatically approving it. Automatically approve it. Save and close. So if we go ahead and create a purchase requisition now, it should hopefully go through. So let's go back. Let's try to create it from here. It's okay. Yeah, we need to log out and log in as Calvin Roth because I need to raise a requisition for which I need to log in as a procurement manager or anyone with a buyer access. Pick up any service related category. I don't like 990, I'll say 995 this time. Submit the requisition line. You should have a requisition created. Let's wait for it to get approved. It's 119. And search for the requisition number as well if you want. is rejected again. Okay. View document history. Let's go back into those rules section again. Let's see. Let's verify it one more time. Okay, let's go back to the same task that we used earlier, setup and maintenance. Manage requisition approvals. Pick it up, edit rules. There are two more rules or three more rules with the highest priority. So they might be clashing with the rule that you have set up. So you delete the other rules, much like other has deleted my rule. Okay, so what am I trying to do here? I'm trying to ensure that there's only one rule with the highest priority. I just want my rule to be evaluated first, and that would ensure that yes, it goes into my rule, and it gets automatically approved. So that is what I intend to do here. So yes, okay, I got the issue. What we did is we didn't deploy it. We were in a hurry and we didn't deploy it. We just clicked on save and close. And when you do it that way, unless you deploy the changes, those won't get reflected in the application unnecessarily. I've deleted the other rules that probably other might be working on. But yeah, this is what we have missed. So you have to deploy the changes that you have done. Okay, please take care of this, guys. Ensure that you don't miss this out. After you make the change, go ahead and deploy it. So let's click on edit rules and let's see. Yes, it is deployed. And if there are no changes to deploy, this button will be disabled. But the moment you make some change, it comes up again. So you click on save and close. Now, if you go back and try to create a requisition, it should go through. Sign out. And whom should we sign in back as? We should sign in back as Calvin Roth, as a procurement manager. Go ahead and create a requisition. Services PR. USD. And you could see the charge amount, charge account. Yeah. Add it to the group, add it to the cart, and then you can submit it. 24, yeah, 120 is the number. Let's wait for it to get approved. Hopefully it should get approved now. Okay, you could see that it has been approved automatically now. Click on done. See that it is approved. And once your purchase requisition is approved, it's time to go ahead and create a PO out of it or based on that. So you go to purchase orders. And you click on the task ribbon. You have under requisitions, you have an option to process requisition. So you process requisition and try to convert it into a purchase order. So you would be able to see your purchase order. So the purchase requisition that you have created, you pick it up and you can click on add to document builder. And this is where if you probably try to use an item in the requisition, if that item attributes are not set up correctly, you might probably face an issue here. So if you pick up an item and if you face some issue while you're trying to add it to a document builder, then try to create it as a service PR. It's just that setups need to be in place. Okay. Or yeah, I could see the requisition. I'm trying to create a new purchase order. Yes, against this particular supplier in currency USD. I'm okay with the details. So this is like you doing an auto create in EBS. In EBS, remember if you are aware of the flows, you would be auto creating a purchase order from requisition, right? So that is exactly what we're doing here. So you click OK. That would show up in the document builder here. You scroll down. You have an option to create it. You could verify the details, and if you're happy with it, yes, the requisition BU as US1 BU, that's fine. And you go ahead and create it. And what would happen? A PO gets created now. Wait for the PO number to be generated. Could see a PO number generated. You copy it. Again, purchase order numbering is something that that can be controlled. It will be done by a functional consultant. You don't have to really worry about it. Okay, so this is the number that has been generated for PO, and you can print a PDF and send it across to the supplier, and that would contain all the details of it. Like remember, we created a AR invoice print report, right? Similarly, you could also create a purchase order print report, and you could attach it here. So when you click on View PDF, it would download the output. And if you scroll down, you could see the details of the purchase order. You could see the details, supplier, legal entity, everything. Yeah, you could open it if you want. Okay, you would be able to see the purchase order. So you're seeing draft here because you haven't submitted it yet. Okay. So you go back and you can, if you're happy with the details, there's a bit of tax included on top of it, and you could see from what requisition this has been created. And if you scroll down, you are also able to see the services that you need. Okay, so you would be able to see all the details, and then you go ahead and submit it. The purchase order would be submitted. You copy the purchase order number, click OK, click on done, and you go back into purchase orders, go back into manage order screen, and you can do a search. Could probably search for a specific order if you want to be. Yeah, you could see that it is in a pending approval state at the moment. You should see it getting approved soon. Or getting changed into open. Yeah, it changed into open, means yes, you can, it's approved and we can, it's in open state, meaning you have to receive the PO after you receive the goods. Yeah, it's like a supplier would send the goods now and you would have to receive it. And to receive the goods, what I have to do, I cannot do it as a procurement manager. It's a job of an inventory specialist. So I would have to log in as an SCM IMPL user. Okay, so I would log in as a SCM IMPL user. If you want to do everything with a single user, you need to have all the roles assigned to that particular user. And what is it that you want to do? You want to receive goods. So it's a supply chain execution that you want to do, right? Supply chain execution. Scroll down, you go into inventory management and you receive that PO. And usually if it is item, you would be receiving it into inventory. But here, even though it's a service-based PO, you would still have to carry out the cycle. You would say that, yes, I have received the services that I need. So you go back, look at the PPT and select the appropriate option. What is it that you have to select? You have to create a receipt. So receipt, you could say receive expected shipments. And you can search with the purchase order that you have created. This is a number that got generated. You take a note of it when you do the cycle. You copy the PO. You see a purchase order there. Pick it up, and then you click on receive. If it's probably an item, you would be receiving it into inventory. Since it's a normal service, you just click on receive. And it would take you to a screen where you can create a receipt. So you could see the details, quantity 1, that is what we selected in there. And here you need to select a specific user in a received by. So you could select, say, Calvin Roth or any other user you could pick up here. So this is like you confirming that yes, we did receive these services from a supplier or item. So don't get confused here. When you click on the dropdown, you don't see any values in the LOE, but you see a search option. You click on the search and you do, you could probably search for what's the user that I have used. You could probably search for Johnson. Any user, any random user you can pick up. Could pick up Richard Johnson. And then what you could do, you could create a receipt. Or you could add to receipt if you want. And that would create, okay. I think you have to create a receipt, not add to a receipt. You can create a receipt. Add to receipt means it'll let you add to an existing receipt. So you could see the details here. See the details with which a receipt is going to get created. I could see the receipt lines, and the moment you submit it, a receipt number gets generated. So this is like you receiving the goods or the services. Okay, you could see a receipt created. Click OK. 51865. Click on done. And that's it. After you receive it, you can go back and log in as pin_IMPL. And you can create an invoice and make a payment because you've received what you need from a supplier. You can go ahead and log in as pin_IMPL. And you go to payables. Since this is Procure-to-Pay, since you are paying a supplier, you have to use payables. Go into invoices. And from here, if you think of it, we have done this cycle already in the disbursement payment file format. So you create an invoice. And yes, you can create invoices without which are not linked to POs. But if it is linked to a PO, you can search with a PO number. Okay, if you're paying a supplier against a particular PO, you can select that particular PO, and you would see a PO here only if it is eligible to be billed. Okay, you pick it up. You would notice that some of the fields get defaulted from a PO, and they would be grayed out as well. You can't change it. Yes, you can give it a number. You could probably select whatever is a number of the PO without the US as an invoice number. And what's the amount that we have used? I think it's 980. So you select that, you select the payment terms, and here you can pick up. So within a PO, if you have 100 lines, and if you have received only 2 lines or 3 lines from a supplier, you can pay him only for those lines. You don't need to pay the invoice in full, or sorry, not the invoice. You don't need to make the payment for all the lines in a PO. And that is where you match your invoice lines with PO lines here. So you click on this, and when you click on it, it will show you the lines on the PO. You can pick and choose for what PO lines you want to create an invoice line against. So if you have 10 lines, you will see those 10 lines showing up here. Yes, I want to make a payment against this particular invoice, the purchase order line. You get a warning. It says that you might overpay the supplier, but that's okay. Just ignore this warning. You select the line. Yes, I'm trying to pay this particular PO, this particular line, because I received the services that I need, and I click on apply. And click OK. And once you do it, you would notice that there would be one invoice line that gets created with the amount and other details pulled over from that purchase order line. Okay. And apart from, and once you do it, yeah, you could look at the details, review the details. If everything is fine. So these are the purchase order details, purchase order number, line, a schedule. And within a line also, you could have multiple schedules, and you could track it as well. You could, pay a different schedule at a different time. Scroll up a little bit. And what's next? You have to make the payment. Before you make a payment, you have to validate the invoice. Only the validated invoices can be paid out. So you try to validate it. What should happen? Invoice would go into needs revalidation state. What could be the reason? The reason is the amounts, the invoice amount would not match with the total amount. And when you're matching invoice lines here, there is a concept of two-way match and three-way match. When you create a purchase order, there is an option that you select wherein you say that, yes, I want to go with a two-way matching or three-way matching. If you go with a two-way matching, you would match invoice. You would match the invoice quantity with a purchase order quantity. If you say three-way match in a purchase order, then the invoice quantity, PO quantity, and the receipt quantity, everything should match. Okay, so we went ahead with the default one, which would be two-way match. So that's why we matched the invoice lines with the purchase order lines. You could see that it has gone into needs revalidation state. If you want to see why, you could look at the error message, but yeah, the answer is this. This is the total, but the invoice amount is not equivalent to that total. So you just update it, save, and then go ahead and revalidate it. Invoice is validated now, and what you could do, you can go ahead and make a payment for this specific invoice, from a payment screen, or right from within the invoice itself. You have an option to pay it in full. You click on the drop down. You have all of the standard options available here. You can pay in full. And when you try to pay an invoice in full, it will ask you from which bank account the payment needs to go out. You could select one of the bank accounts, existing bank accounts. And you could select the payment process profile. This payment process profile that you select here, this would determine few things. In what format the file needs to be generated, because remember, there would be a template you attach to a PPP. And it also controls whether the file that is generated needs to be transmitted or not, because you have an option to attach a transmission configuration as well there. And you click on, remaining fields, you could leave it blank. You can leave it blank. and you click on submit. And what would happen? The payment file would get generated in this particular format, ANSI X12 format. Go ahead and submit it. You should see a payment getting created. Payment created 7364. Click on OK. Go into the schedule process screen. Monitor process. You could see the format payment files job running. So this is the job which would create the payment file. So see that it has succeeded. You could see that there is a text file in there, text output generated, and if you look at the output that is generated, you could probably save the file and open it with a text editor. And you would be able to see the payment file that is generated. It's in a completely different format because we picked up a payment process profile that way. And yeah, this completes the cycle. And what you could do is if you go back and see the payment status or the invoice, if you go into invoice, the invoice would have been marked as paid. You're going to manage invoices and search for the invoice number. We have used the PO number itself without US as an invoice number. You search for it. And if you scroll to the right, you could see that it is validated and it is fully paid as well, but it is not accounted. And what you could do, you could select that invoice, do an accounting, and yeah, you could account in draft, see if the accounting entries are correct or not, and you could post it to GL after that, or you could directly post it to GL. If you select post option, it would be accounted first, and then the transaction will be posted to GL, provided the accounting rules are complete. Yeah, you could see that accounting is complete. You can click on view accounting, and that would show you the accounting entries. So you could see the accounts that are paid by this particular transaction. Okay, so you have some non-recoverable tax accounts and an item expense account, and you have few other liability, the main liability account and few other liability accounts are got hit. Okay, any questions, guys? Any questions on this in the P2P cycle?
So Prasad, whatever you have shown in this entire process, starting right from this creating of requisition to generating the AP invoices. So all this process, I mean, it's not a single end user job, right? Multiple end users.
Correct. It's a multiple users. Each user does their job exactly as we have signed in as different users, right?
Yeah.
Those users will be doing their job.
Okay. And when the requisition was getting failed, then you created that work rule.
Correct.
Rule you created.
Yeah.
To get the requisition approved automatically.
Correct.
But what I was thinking is the approval should come from the supplier side, right? Not from this.
So approval doesn't come from supplier. Approval. So normally when you what a procurement consultant will do is they will talk to the customer or the client, and they will understand their requirements. So whenever they raise a PO, what is it that they expect to happen? So based on that, he would set up the approval rules. He would not do like we created just one rule, right? Instead of one rule, he would first get the requirement and configure all those 30 or 40 rules that need to go into that particular screen, and those rules will determine which PO or which requisition needs to go through what approvals and on what basis. Okay, so since we don't have a procurement consultant who has done the setups in this instance, we just quickly fixed it by doing automatic approval. It doesn't come from supplier. You could probably, if you want it to be driven based on supplier, you can do it as well. How do you do it? We set requisition BU equal to US1 BU, right? Say for example, requisitions created against a particular supplier needs to be automatically approved. That could very well be a use case, meaning he might be a trusted supplier and you might, yeah, it could or could not be a use case, but if required, that can be achieved by writing the rules. But it would be a job of a functional consultant to get the requirements and do the setups, configurations.
Okay, so supplier data we choose from this pcaplet. So that data setup also we have to do initially, right? At first, whatever
Yeah,
suppliers
of course.
are there.
Yeah, that will come under a data load. Like you use FPDA templates to do an item upload. You would use FPDA templates to load the suppliers. You would use FPDA template to load the purchase orders as well, requisitions as well. So that comes under the data load. Yes.
Okay, so the suppliers are not using any kind of ERP application in this case. Only the client is using.
Yeah, the client is using ERP application. You send across, print the PDF and send it across to them. And they would ship the goods and they would send you a confirmation back and you make a payment to them and you send out throughout the process you keep sending communication to the supplier.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, guys, from anyone else? Okay, I'll take it as no. Thanks for your time, guys. We'll pick up O2C cycle tomorrow. Okay, thank you, guys.